March 7th, 1945, 14:27 hours. Hauptmann Ernst Dietrich stares at 8 black dots climbing through 22,000 feet. His Bf-109G squadron outnumbers them 2-1. In 90 seconds, burning coffins, his own pilots screaming on the radio as American fighters they'd laughed at for 3 years suddenly moved like nothing in the Reich's arsenal could touch. They called it the Thunderbolt. 7 tons of American steel that looked like it flew on prayers. Luftwaffe pilots joked it was so heavy it could only dive, never climb, never turn, never catch a 109 in a dogfight. Then in January 1945, someone in the 56th Fighter Group flipped a switch labeled War Emergency Power, injected water and methanol into superheated Pratt & Whitney cylinders, and the laws of physics bent. What happened in the next 4 months erased 200 years of aerial combat doctrine and turned the P-47 from a respected fighter into an absolute apex predator that made veteran German aces radio their last words in disbelief. The numbers don't lie. Standard P-47D, 2,000 horsepower, 428 mph maximum, rate of climb that made bomber pilots nervous about their escort keeping up. P-47M with water methanol injection, 2,800 horsepower, 470 mph in level flight, vertical climb rate that let it chase jet fighters. But here's what broke German morale. Inscreva-se para mais armas que mudaram guerras inteiras. 2 vídeos por dia. The system only worked for 15 minutes before the tanks ran dry, and American pilots learned to save those 15 minutes for the exact moment when Luftwaffe fighters committed to an attack they couldn't abort. February 14th, 1945. Uderdig Celsius at 28,000 feet over the Ruhr Valley. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, 23 years old, Lawton, Oklahoma, leads Blue Flight of the 61st Fighter Squadron. His wingman counts 16 Bf-109Gs and FW-190Ds, positioning for a slashing attack on B-17s, hauling incendiaries toward Dresden. Standard doctrine says engage cautiously. The 109 turns tighter, the 190 rolls faster. The Thunderbolt survives by staying fast and keeping energy. Johnson's gloved hand hovers over the water methanol switch. The German formation commits. 15 fortresses and 150 crewmen depend on the next decision. He flips the switch. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 doesn't roar. It detonates. Water and methanol spray into cylinders already burning 100-octane aviation fuel at combat power. Combustion temperatures that would melt pistons in 3 minutes get controlled by the cooling effect of vaporizing water. Manifold pressure jumps from 52 inches to 72 inches. Horsepower explodes from 2,000 to 2,800. The 4-bladed propeller claws air so violently Johnson's head slams back against the armor plate. His airspeed indicator needle sweeps past numbers that aren't supposed to exist in level flight. 440, 450, 460 MPa while climbing. The Thunderbolt doesn't accelerate. It catapults. Oberst Klaus Hartmann, leading the 109 formation, watches his tactical advantage evaporate in 20 seconds. The American fighters he'd calculated would take 2 minutes to climb into effective firing position, arrive in 40 seconds. His radio fills with confused transmissions. They're climbing like rockets. Impossible closure rate. They're above us. How are they above us? Hartmann's been flying combat since Poland in 1939. He knows what every aircraft in the European theater can do. What he's watching violates everything he knows. Grid reference 5123, 1441 hours. Johnson's first burst catches an FW-190D trying to dive away, the one maneuver that always worked against Thunderbolts. Except this Thunderbolt stays glued to his 6 through a 60-degree dive that pulls 5 Gs and hits 500 nm/m. The Focke-Wulfs wings fold at 485. The pilot never touches his ejection handles. His squadron mates watch their speed advantage, their one guaranteed escape, become a death sentence. If you're seeing how impossible this was, hit that like button. Then came the moment that shattered Luftwaffe doctrine completely. Hartmann orders his formation to split and engage in turning combat. The 109's home territory, where its lighter wing loading lets it outturn any American fighter. 3 109's bracket blue flight, forcing them into defensive spirals. Standard engagement says the Thunderbolts should disengage, dive away, reset with speed. Johnson does the opposite. He yanks the stick into his lap, full throttle, water methanol screaming, and the P-47 claws vertical, 90-degree nose-up climb. The 109s try to follow. Their engines quit at 12,000 feet of climb. They stall, snap, tumble. Johnson's Thunderbolt keeps climbing, levels off at 32,000 feet, rolls inverted, and drops back into the fight from directly above. The Germans never trained for an enemy that could do that. The tactical board at Luftwaffe Reich headquarters, 15-20 hours, engaging aircraft, 16 Bf-109GK, 8 P-47M. Results: 11 German aircraft destroyed, 2 damaged beyond repair, 1 crash-landed. American losses: 0 damage. 1 P-47 returned with 12 rounds remaining and empty water methanol tanks. Major Heinrich Baer, 220 confirmed kills, reads the after-action reports and writes in his diary, "They have changed their aircraft, or they have changed physics. Either way, we cannot win against this." But the Americans didn't tell them the secret. They had no idea their enemy was flying on borrowed time. Every P-47M pilot knew the equation: 15 minutes of war emergency power, then back to standard performance. The water methanol system carried 56 gallons, split between 2 fuselage tanks. Injection rate at maximum boost, 3.7 gallons per minute. Do the math. 15 minutes of godlike performance. Then you're flying the same heavy fighter the Germans learned to respect, but not fear. The trick was making those 15 minutes count when it mattered most. When bombers were under attack, when German fighters were committed and couldn't disengage, when the shock value was worth more than sustained combat power. March 2nd, 1945. First Lieutenant Francis S. Gabreski, 26, Oil City, Pennsylvania, 28 confirmed kills, gets jumped by 6 Bf-109Ks over Leipzig. Grid, 51-34. These aren't the standard 109Gs. These are the K4 variant, upgraded engines, 2,000 horsepower, 452 mph, designed specifically to counter American fighter improvements. The Germans learned, they adapted. They built something that could theoretically match a standard P-47M. They just didn't know about the switch. Gabreski's combat report, typed with shaking hands 4 hours later, engaged 6 enemy aircraft at 13:47 hours. Initial disadvantage: they had altitude and position. Activated water methanol injection at 13:47:32. Closed from 1,200 yards to firing range in 18 seconds. Led 109, attempted vertical climb, standard escape maneuver. I stayed with him through 8,000 feet of vertical. His engine quit. Mine didn't. He bailed at 29,000 feet. Second 109 tried to run, hit 460 meter in a dive. I hit 510. His wings separated. I had to throttle back to avoid overshooting the debris. Tell me in comments, you're in that cockpit. You've got 15 minutes of power that makes you untouchable. When do you use it? The numbers that made German intelligence officers resign. Standard P-47D cruise speed, 350 pfo. P-47M with water methanol, 470 pf sustained, 510 mf in combat dive. That's B-17 bomber maximum speed, exceeded by a single engine fighter. Rate of climb standard, 2,800 feet per minute. With injection, 4,200 feet per minute. 0 to 20,000 feet. Standard P-47 needs 7 minutes. P-47M needs 4 minutes 40 seconds. The time it takes to read this paragraph, a Thunderbolt could climb from ground level to bomber altitude and arrive with energy to fight. But here's what broke the Luftwaffe's will. They couldn't tell which Thunderbolts had the system. External recognition: impossible. Standard P-47s and P-47Ms looked identical until the pilot flipped the switch. German pilots had to assume every Thunderbolt they encountered could suddenly transform into something that outperformed their best aircraft. The psychological warfare was more devastating than the tactical advantage. You can train pilots to fight a superior enemy. You can't train them to fight an enemy whose capabilities are unknown until the moment combat starts. March 19th, 1945. The 56th Fighter Group's tally board chalked onto a hangar wall at RAF Boxted. Sorties flown, 237. Water methanol system activated, 187. Engagements won, 187. Aircraft lost to enemy action, 0. Pilots lost, 0. German aircraft destroyed, 143 confirmed. The ratio wasn't combat, it was execution. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, veteran of the Spanish Civil War, Western Front, Eastern Front Africa, commanded JG-7, the Luftwaffe's first operational jet fighter unit, flying Me-262s that should have owned the sky. His intercepted radio transmission, March 24th, 1945. Even the 262's speed advantage means nothing if we must commit to an attack. The Thunderbolts climb to our altitude before we can complete our firing pass. We are flying the fastest fighter aircraft ever built, and we are running from propeller-driven American fighters. This is how empires end. But what they didn't know was the Americans were terrified it wouldn't work. Technical report, Wright Field, December 1944, stamped confidential. Water methanol injection increases manifold pressure beyond designed limits. Expected service life reduced 60%. Predicted piston failure rate 23% within 100 hours. Recommended maximum usage. Avoid if possible. The engineers said don't do it. The test pilot said it'll shake apart. The maintenance crews said they'd be rebuilding engines every other week. And then combat pilots flipped the switch anyway and discovered that 15 minutes of overwhelming superiority was worth rebuilding the engine. Lieutenant Colonel David Schilling, commanding officer 56th Fighter Group, wrote to Wright Field in February 1945, "Your engineers are correct. We're destroying engines. We're also destroying the Luftwaffe. Send more engines. We'll send back more kill confirmations. The math works in our favor." The maintenance cost was insane. Every water methanol run required complete engine inspection. Pistons showed stress cracks after 3 activations. Cylinder heads needed replacement after 8. But the P-47 was built like a tank, literally designed around the concept that battle damage was inevitable. Swapping engines took a skilled crew 6 hours. Training a replacement pilot took 18 months. The Americans could afford to burn out engines. The Germans couldn't afford to lose pilots. April 7th, 1945. The war has 3 weeks left, but nobody knows that yet. Major Hermann Graf, 212 confirmed kills. Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords intercepts a P-47M over the Elbe River. He's flying a Bf-109K4 with every upgrade German engineering could provide. This should be an even fight, experience versus technology, veteran versus youth. He gets tone, he fires. The Thunderbolt snaps into a vertical climb that pulls 6 Gs and doesn't slow down. Graf's 109 shudders, stalls, falls. He recovers at 8,000 feet. The Thunderbolt is still climbing. He radios his wingman. "I cannot chase what violates physics. Return to base." His diary entry that night, discovered by American occupation forces, "Today I learned that courage and skill mean nothing against an enemy who has changed the possible. We trained to fight men. They built machines that don't care about training. I am the obsolete weapon now." Then everything changed. One final time. April 16th, 1945. The P-47M's water methanol tanks read empty across the entire 56th Fighter Group. Supply chain collapse, advancing Soviet forces cutting logistics lines, the Reich crumbling too fast for ordnance to keep up. The Thunderbolts are back to standard power, still formidable, still dangerous, but no longer godlike. Luftwaffe intelligence notices. They vector 2 full squadrons of FJ-90Ds to intercept a bomber stream, betting the Americans have lost their edge. Blue Flight encounters them at 24,000 feet. No water methanol, no emergency power, just skill, aggression, and 3 months of fighting like they were invincible. The muscle memory doesn't fade. The confidence doesn't break. They engage anyway. Final score, 8 German aircraft destroyed, 2 damaged. 1 P-47 takes hits in the engine cowling and oil cooler, limps home on 7 cylinders, lands with 30 seconds of oil pressure remaining. The pilot's name, Robert Johnson. He climbs out, runs his hand along 14.7mm cannon holes in his wing root, and tells his crew chief, "We don't need the magic switch anymore. We learned how to fight like we still have it." The equation had changed completely. The water methanol system gave American pilots 3 months of overwhelming superiority. But superiority breeds confidence. Confidence breeds aggression, and aggression becomes doctrine. By April 1945, P-47 pilots were engaging superior numbers with standard power and winning because they'd forgotten how to fight defensively. The temporary advantage became permanent mindset. May 8, 1945. Germany surrenders. Final tally for P-47M-equipped squadrons. 1,147 German aircraft destroyed. 37 P-47Ms lost to all causes. Flak, mechanical failure, weather. 0 lost in air-to-air combat when water methanol was available. 0. The Germans never shot down a Thunderbolt flying on war emergency power. Not once, not in 4 months of trying. Post-war interviews with surviving Luftwaffe pilots reveal the same theme. We adapted to everything else. Longer-range Mustangs, better tactics, overwhelming numbers. We found ways to fight, but we never solved the Thunderbolts that climbed like fighters and dove like meteors. We never knew which ones could do it. The uncertainty killed us more than the performance. The technical secret wasn't even secret. Water methanol injection was known technology. The Germans used it on some FW-190s. The British experimented with it on Spitfires. But the Americans were the only ones who built it into standard operational fighters, trained every pilot to use it, and treated burned-out engines as acceptable losses. It wasn't the technology that won. It was the willingness to break the machines to break the enemy. Lieutenant Johnson kept a letter from his mother, carried in his flight suit, through 63 combat missions, found after the war, dated March 1945. "Your father says you're flying too aggressively. Come home safe." His response never sent. "Mom, I'm flying a 7-ton fighter that shouldn't be able to climb, powered by a system that destroys itself while running. Aggressive is the only speed we have. But I'm coming home. They can't catch us anymore." The P-47M flew for 5 months. Water methanol injection gave it 4 months of absolute dominance, and in those 4 months it taught the Luftwaffe what every warrior eventually learns. Technology can be matched, tactics can be countered, but the willingness to sacrifice the machine to save the man, that's what wins wars. The Thunderbolt earned its name by making thunder optional. If you want more stories about the weapons that changed everything when everyone said they wouldn't work, subscribe. I bring you 2 videos every day about the decisions and innovations that rewrote history. Next video, the 5-minute naval battle that made Japan abandon an entire invasion fleet, and the one American destroyer captain who bluffed his way into history books by pretending his ship was a battleship. You won't believe what happened when the Japanese called his bluff.